Hey everybody, it's Dr. Lisa. I appreciate you joining me today on Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. It is time to get things cranked up. It's October. So some people are happy about October and others tell me that they are not happy about October, but that's okay because I'm happy about October and I'm happy to talk to you all today about some of the spooky things that I learned. I saved them all for this month. So, if you want to talk about some of your paranormal stories, you can always tell me. The number is 765 205 1959. You can also email me at kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com and you can reach me. Somebody said they've been waiting. Me too. You can also reach me on social media. So I am live now on Facebook. I'm live on both of my Instagram pages. And I want to share with you all on my website, I have a page on there called For Women with Love. And it is truly another book that I wrote that I did not publish. The crazy thing to me is that this blew up beyond what I can comprehend. And so, really, is all that I can do. And I did start putting it together for a book. So, we can pause on that other one and just focus on this one. That's what we're going to do. I am not a machine. I can do a lot of things, but I don't think I can write two books at once anymore or finish them up. So, let's just go ahead and finish this one. And then we'll work on the next one when I run out of all of my little kids' stories. So I hope you guys had a good week. Are you ready to get it started? Let's do it. All righty. So if you have not checked out my blog at your convenience, please do so. My blog is Lisa Liggins, Liggins, Chambers, CHAMBERS.com. I always say hashtag kids can see ghosts, can you? And hashtag it's October. I've been doing that right now as well. So the reason that I brought up my website is because some of you are new joining me, and welcome to this podcast. And the best way to keep up with it is to actually go to my website and read the blog entries. That way you'll understand, or you'll have a background for some of the kids that I talk about, because I have so many stories that I'm actually going to talk about some of these kids over and over and over again, just in different blogs. So I think I'm currently on blog 33 or 34 this week. And what we're talking about today is actually blog 17, and it's from June. So I've been writing these blog entries for a couple of months now, and I am really enjoying it. And so are all of you. So thank you for supporting me. I really, really appreciate it. All right. Anytime you guys want to come on live, whether it's on social media or on Podbean, just chime in and I will talk about your stories as I did last week. That was really exciting. All right. Today we're talking about blog 17. And I titled this one Beyond the Trees. And I'll set it up for you as I always do. I was actually, the reason, sometimes I have a lot of memories of the kids, and I try to write the blogs based upon my memory. But sometimes I don't remember everything because they're so detailed. And so every now and then I'll get writer's block. And I'll say, what am I going to talk about now? What am I going to talk about now? And a lot of times I call my best friend who is listening. Hey, girl. Hey. And I was talking to her. We were doing I call it walking with Anna. And we were doing our walk, and she just blew me a kiss. And, I was chatting with her, and I looked to my right, and there were a group of trees on the right-hand side of me. And I stood there for a second and thought about some things. And I said, I remember some kids told me about some things that they would see in the sky and in the trees. And at that moment, it triggered this blog. And it triggered this blog because I was really relaxed that day, which doesn't always happen to me. Doesn't always happen to me. For example, I'm the only psychologist in a school of 600 kids. You heard me right, 600 kids. That's a lot of babies. So, relaxation is not something that I always do. But this day I was really relaxed and I was looking at the trees and I just kind of stopped for a moment and took it all in. So the picture that's on the blog, that's exactly how I felt. I was kind of looking up at the sky and the sun and I was thinking at that moment, I wonder what's beyond the trees. And I was talking to her on the phone and I said, "Oh, I remember some stuff that the kids said to me. My nebulous kids, I call kids that can see ghosts nebulous kids." And I said, I know some stuff about what they've seen in trees. A couple of animals went by, a couple of squirrels. I was just watching everything. And then I told her, I was like, I have a story that I'm on a blog. And I was standing there thinking about it. And what she typically will do is say, what? What are you blogging? What are you blogging? She just said on Podbean, this is a true story. I remember this walk. I don't lie to you guys. I don't misrepresent myself in the public. And so, I said, I know what I'm going to blog about. And she's like, what? And I did tell her, I said, I can recall a time when children told me about seeing ghosts in trees. And so I talked it out with her because I couldn't remember all the details at the time. And so it took me about 17 blogs to really remember more details about it. See, I can remember certain things. Like, I'm going to tell you guys something before we get off today about television. But until I can recall all the details, I try hard not to look at their, data that I have, because it's a lot. And so I try to remember their stories without looking at the reports, for example, the psych reports that I have. And so for this one, I had to wait, because I could not I remembered the child, but I couldn't remember the background. So then I thought about it. I said, you know what? It's okay to just write about things I remember without necessarily going into detail all the time about the kids. But then I started to remember other stories about child E. So E as an egg. And it was so clear to me. It was so clear to me, some of the stories. Now, I don't exactly remember the background and this child's background. And some of you ask about gender and you ask about race. This was actually a female child, who was Caucasian American. And I had an aha moment and I said, this stuff is spooky that I'm going to write about in blog 17. And it's even spookier when I talk about it. So get ready. I was working with this little one, and there are certain things that I do recall about this child. This was a child. You know what? I'm going to give you an example that I did not put in the blog. Some of you watch Lovecraft Country. You guys watch Lovecraft Country? It's actually really good. You know what? I was pretty pissed when they canceled Lovecraft Country. But anyway, if you watch that, is it on Netflix? I can't remember where it is. But anyway, Google Lovecraft Country if you have not watched it. And there's a scene, it's on HBO, thank you. There's a scene where there are a set of twins. Man, let me tell you. Every time I think about those twins in Lovecraft Country, I can't Google their names right now. I don't even want to say their names. They spooked me the hell out on Lovecraft Country. And I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. And I went back to Child E when I thought about it. Do you guys remember those twins? They were creepy and following her and had the long nails and whew, scary. Okay. That's an example of how Child E would see stuff. And you guys know by now, in rolling with me in this blog and on this podcast, that what this child was seeing was demons. And that's what these two little entities were on Lovecraft Country. So when I talk about this one pair of ghosts with that Child E used to see, that's kind of what they look like. I should have put that in my blog, but I didn't think about it at the time. Obviously, in Lovecraft, I don't think it was on back in June, maybe. But anyway, so one of the things that was always striking to me about these children was that they would tell me that sometimes the things that they see would change form. And I've talked about that before. And so when they would change form, sometimes they would change into the things that the kids watch on TV. So go back to the first blog, I think it was the second one. Remember the kid who drew in his own blood the satanic star on the wall? And that was the kid that we hospitalized a couple of times. Okay, that's an example right there, if you remember that kid, of, just kind of doing some, things and seeing stuff, that were demonic. And so Child E was another kid who could do that. And so that's why I mean checking the blog, because those of you who've read the blog from day one are fully aware of the kid that I'm talking about who drew the satanic symbol, on the wall. Well, these are the kinds of things that Child E would talk about. And so when we were together, I remembered when I was at the park that this was one of the kids who would always talk about seeing ghosts in the trees and also in the forest preserve. So if you're not familiar with the forest preserve, sometimes when homes are built, they will keep common ground. Behind this child's home was common ground. Now, I want you to picture this. Here you have a house. Here you have a house, a deck, a backyard, and forest preserve, if you can see me in the back. So this little child would always tell me that there were a set of identical ghosts, identical, who would dress up in different things that would appeal to her. And so what they would do is, for example, if she was going roller skating, they would appear to her in roller skating gear. And I remember this. Now, this is a kid I don't even think she was 10 yet, but she knew that for roller skating, you wear glittery stuff, right? Glitter, at least we did when we were a kid. That's how they were appearing to her. And they would always call her into the forest. And that's what would get to me. Because think about it, coming from a psychological background, I didn't know actually who was calling this young child into the forest. And that was scary to me. And I did get that child's parents involved, because even when they, tell me that they can see ghosts, just like you all have an obligation to protect them. So I don't know, unless I test these ghosts or test these kids to find out that's what they really see. All I knew is that something was calling this kid into where? The forest. And it was at night, and the little girl would go. Every time my spirit friends are calling me in the forest, so I have to go. And I want you to picture it that way, because that's exactly how she told me. And so there were also times when they would appear to her in her bedroom and in her room in her closet, I mean her bedroom and in her closet, and they would always dress differently to this little girl and tell her to come and play with them beyond the trees, for example, beyond the trees. So beyond the trees is in reference to child E, come into the trees and play with me. And that's what this little girl would do. And that was scary to me. It wasn't scary that she can see ghosts, because remember, I was used to it by then. But when I've had kids where they actually call them and tell them to come here, like they were doing with this child. I didn't know who could actually, even if that's what was happening, which she said it was, who could be lurking and see this little girl going into the forest at night by herself. That was just dangerous. So again, her parents got involved. But the thing that was striking was that the parents knew that she could see ghosts and that they would come to her. And I told you sometimes the parents are really cool with it, kind of like, oh, good. Then you can talk to my grandparents or my deceased brother, and tell me about them, right? I teach them better than that, because you don't need to talk to these things. So sometimes during the day, this little kid would be on the deck and they would come on the deck. But what was really scary, other than this, was that when this little girl would watch TV, they would appear next to the TV and they would change into whatever character she was watching on TV. And I heard that several times from kids. I'm going to sidebar for a second. I remember a little boy told me that he was watching Nightmare on Elm Street. You guys remember Nightmare on Elm Street? Nightmare on Elm Street. And Freddy Krueger, I'll never forget this. He said Freddy Krueger would be standing next to the TV, but he knew that it was a ghost, because anything that he would watch on TV that was scary, it would change into the character. So if he watched Jason, listen, I'm scared of Jason. Nothing in this house better turn into Jason, because I'm out of here with my kids. Now, seriously, they would, he said that it would change. And he said he was so scared because Freddy Krueger would just walk through his hallways and walk through the house just like he did on TV. And I was like, holy crap. You see why some of these kids wind up having mental health concerns? This is why they would end up having mental health concerns. Can you imagine, like, if you just think about it right now, if first of all, a ghost, right, if you don't see them, but second of all, an image of Freddy Krueger just going by as you were sitting down. Could you imagine that? And that's how this little boy felt. And this is what this little boy saw in his home. Well, this little girl would see too, just like Lovecraft Country. She would see too. They were together all the time. No, the parents did not allow her into the forest. Remember, I said this was at night. So she was going because they would call her into the forest. Does that make sense? So she would get called. They would call her name. Like if her name was Tony. Tony, we're waiting for you. We're in the forest. Come and play. We're in the forest. Come and play. But whispers. Tony. Because remember, they don't like the parents to know. And that is a consistent thing that I heard from the kids, that these ghosts will come to them, but they don't like their parents. And actually, some of the parents on one of my websites talk about that, about how they will tell the kids that they will get involved, and then the ghosts will to demand the ghost to go away, and the ghost will go away. They want to manipulate the kids, but then when the parents get involved, more times than not, that kind of puts an end to it if they, add God and prayer and all those things to it. And it's just a consistent, issue that I heard from parents that happens. And a lot of kids, not just child E, but I'm going to go as far as saying the majority of them would tell me that about their parents, that they would do this separate from adults. But when the adults get involved and they really start teaching their kids how to be stronger and to, with this gift, and also how to ask God to help them or to pray these things away, they would actually feel better and they would go away. And so, these kids traditionally will play, the younger ones especially will play, with these spirits. And that's what she was doing. Remember, the kids, demons are manipulative and they want to get your kids to trust them. So what they do is they come in a form that's really easy, very easy for the kids to fall victim to them. So think about what I said about child E. Bright colors, come and play with us. I don't remember. Child E, come and play with us. Come to the forest. And a child will say, oh, my friends are waiting for me. Same thing about, this kid's room. At night when this kid is supposed to be sleeping, this kid is up. This was child E playing with these things. So I was very concerned about this little child going into the forest preserve, the common ground, all forests, to play with ghosts that were calling her to come and play. If you work with kids or you work with the elderly, you are a mandated reporter. So if her parents didn't do anything about it, to me, that would have been a safety issue. So despite what I know about nebulous kids, I still have a duty to protect. And those kind of things don't go away just because you have a different kind of population of kids. This child could see ghosts. Over time, I did test her out. And the thing is, oh God, I remember this so well. These two ghosts would not scare this little girl. And they would hide in her closet when she was at school. And she said they would tell her, we're in your closet until you get back. Things like that, so that no one else could hear. And so I talk a lot every now and then about, demons being manipulative, but also some of these kids find comfort. Because think about this, if you even have kids or if you don't. Kids are traditionally scared of monsters, right? They're scared of monsters at night. I know all three of my kids were scared of the monsters. One time I had to have the monsters arrested for my oldest daughter to go to sleep. And so when you think about how we leave our kids in their rooms, and it's even with night lights on, it could be scary. So then you have two comforting things in the room. Now we know they're ghosts, or we even know they're demons, but kids, they're like, cool. My friends are with me as long as they don't scare them. Now, when I brought up the little boy who said Freddy Krueger was like walking through his house, that's scary. He was old enough to know, whoa, I can see ghosts, but this thing is changing into Freddy Krueger. Is it going to kill me? That's different. This was a little girl who sought and found comfort in these things. So if she was going to open her closet because it was dark, she's like, my friends are in there. They're in there. And I would say stuff to her like, well, when you go to school, where do they go? They just stay in my bedroom. But when my mom and dad come in to tuck me in the bed, they disappear. They disappear. So they would go into her closet when her parents appeared. And she would tell me that. And I always say, too, that you'll be surprised at what kids will tell you. But these are the kinds of things that they would tell me. And I get really detailed when I work with kids. Like, I question the heck out of them and their parents when what we call structured clinical interviews, because I try to find out every little thing that could be going on so that I can best help, these families. And so sometimes if you're wondering how did I have so much detail, it's because I asked them. And I asked them together and I asked them separately, and I asked them one day and then they come back the next week and I asked it a different kind of way. And that's how. But the one thing other than the forest that I truly remember with Child E is being out on the deck too, not just during the day, but at night. And Child E reminded me a lot of Child C because they were both kind of friendly with the ghost that they saw. Child E played with them all the time. And what happened with this kid is that it was really difficult to separate her from these two ghosts. She really became, I'm going to even say, attached to these two because they came to her all the time. And this is probably one of the kids that made me afraid. Child A made me nervous. It's different. Child A was listening to them. And I'd be interested in seeing Child A now because back then they were kind of consuming this kid, and he did not want to part from them. This is different. This is different. Child E was more, these are my best friends mentality. And she enjoyed their company. And we had a hard time, I did, with her parents together. I worked closely with parents, and I had a hard time separating her from these two. I mean, if you were a kid and this happened to you and these things look really friendly and, they were dressed in a way that, is pleasing to kids, like bright colors and we're going roller skating. And, when you're mad at your mom, you can talk to me, or if you have problems in school, I'll tell you what to do. I'll just tell you to punch someone out. I'm on your team. Then what happens is that they become very attached, some of them, to these things. But again, I obviously don't know what the plan was, what they were trying to do to this little girl, but the forest was a bit too much for me. It was too much. I even remember, there are certain scenes in movies where you'll see kids playing in the backyard, holding the hands of something, like in some of these scary movies. And obviously, I don't see ghosts, but, you know, some of you do. And some of you have seen movies where these kids are playing Ring Around the Rosie. For example, ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posy, ashes, ashes, they all fall down. And you're kind of looking at the kid like, okay, nobody's with you. Who are you playing with? And she would always say, my friends. My friends. So you know what happened? You know exactly what happened when I got involved. They tried to pull her from me, and that always happens, and it happened too much with regard to these kids. When I would get involved, these excuse me, these demons didn't like it. And so what they were doing is the same thing they did with Child A, is trying to keep her from me by saying things negatively like, you know what, we're your friends. I'm just giving you an example. She can't help you, talking about me. You don't need her. You don't need your parents if they want you to go to her. You don't need anyone but us. I got quiet because that actually gets scary for me when they get that consumed with these dark angels. Remember, the kids called them dark angels. And I glanced at my blog and I wrote that I did psychological testing with her, um, which is good because I couldn't remember while talking to you all. And what I do recall is that I wasn't able to see her again after that was over. Um, and I do remember she liked to wear dresses. So she's very, I remember her, with the snap of my finger. And I was not able to see her again only because the parents, I think, thought that they could deal with it. And, there was no reason to have insurance pay for it anymore if they felt like they can deal with it. And there's nothing you can do about that. Sometimes you lose clients or parents, find other ways of addressing and helping their kid, addressing their needs and helping their kids. However, I have met other kids who had some of the same experiences as Child E. Sometimes they just get so consumed with seeing spirits that for as much as you, even kids that don't see ghosts, for as much as you want to help them, and then when you try to, sometimes you just can't help everyone. So you do your job. So for example, my job with this one was to get her psychological testing done. I had all this other information, and I know I still have it. I just don't want to look at it. But the problem here was that she became so enmeshed with these ghosts. There was another child. This is going to be funny to some of you who grew up in the 60s and 70s, and some of us who tried to emulate that style in the 80s. This is another story that I have not talked about on the blog, but I'm looking at it on the blog. And I forgot to talk to you all about it. So why not talk about it on the podcast? Because it ties directly into what was happening with Child E. This was another kid who talked about seeing ghosts dressing up as different things. And also, this is a kid who saw ghosts in the backyard, hiding behind the tree. So two kids here that I'm talking about that had some of the same experiences. And I remember this one because I thought it was so funny, and I still do. This is a kid who saw ghosts dressed up as hippies. They dressed up as hippies. I'll tell you, some people don't believe in, like, demons, angels, all this stuff. But let me tell you, I have so many experiences with these kids. I am certainly a believer. And this one made me laugh. This is when both of these kids I met in St. Louis. And these were two kids that I saw at the more religious company. And this was actually a bit of a kind of like a special kid to me. This kid that I didn't tell you about, maybe I'll name this kid Child H or whatever in another blog. This kid actually told me, this was the one who taught me that not all angels are God's angels. This is the same kid who would see ghosts dressed up as hippies, and they would hide in the tree. So same thing. He said that they would kind of do this. Now, this was a kid who didn't really fall for it, because there are some kids who are able to separate what they see. Now, this is a kid who knew that these things were demons that he was seeing, but he would describe them to me. We would have long conversations about it. Sometimes the long conversations, it was therapy for these kids, because if you think about it, if these kids are telling people they can see ghosts, a lot of people don't believe them. So some of them get a lot of anxiety. So to kind of decrease the anxiety, it's okay. And all of you, if you experience anxiety, you have to start talking, about some of the things that you experience to decrease that feeling. And so that's what this kid was doing. It would tell me beautiful, detailed stories and draw pictures. And I can kick myself for not keeping those pictures, but it would draw pictures of various things that were seen. So telling me about, these hippie type ghosts would be drawn as, you know, how we used to dress back in the day with the neon socks and stuff and the bright shoestrings. And I remember there was one with a jacket, and the jacket had glitter on it, but it was like a hot pink, and then the hair being up, and so this kid would talk about how they would hide in the trees in the backyard, and they would do the same thing. So they would wave to him to come in the backyard, come and join us, like in the backyard. But this kid wouldn't go, because this is a kid. Remember, this was a more religious company that I worked with. And so this kid wouldn't go, unlike our little child E, who was like, heck yeah, I'm going in the forest with my friend, right? This one didn't. And so over time, when I got to know this child who saw what I call a hippie ghost, and this is another child that I tested, I learned that not all angels are God's angels, which was something that I was not taught by any of the other kids. And we sat and talked about it. So I'll tell you what we talked about. It was fascinating to me. So, you remember I talked about how all the kids saw the really tall angel behind me. Okay. This kid could see it too. So could the little girl, child E. This kid could see it too. Okay. And this kid would say stuff like, oh, your angel is behind you. And I would go, yeah, I know. All the kids tell me she's behind me. And I would say, all of the angels around me, the kids talk about. And he goes, well, yeah, we were sitting in my office, and the window, my desk was L-shaped, and the window was behind my back. And this kid would say stuff like, well, yeah. I mean, these are God's angels, but there's a difference because there are also white angels. Now, go to, what's our show we talk about? Lucifer. Now, if you watch Lucifer, now I've gotten, kind of far in watching Lucifer. Lucifer actually has white wings. Did you guys notice that? If you watch Lucifer, Lucifer has white wings. Now, to some people, that would be confusing because they would think, well, why the heck does Lucifer have white wings? Lucifer is Satan. Satan doesn't have white wings. These kids say angels can have white wings that are actually demons. Some of them are black. But remember, they can change what they look like to appeal to us. And I was like, what? This was, several years ago, after I had been learning all this stuff from the kids, after I had talked to pastors, after I had had a lot of experiences working with these kids, these nebulous kids. This kid changed my world, because I said, wait a minute. I thought glowing white meant they're God's angels. This kid said, no, not all angels are of God. And I thought, now, I just got confused. We were sitting there talking about it. And what I learned from this kid was that you have to, if you want for protection, you definitely have to call upon God and ask Him to send His angels. So, what was happening is, and this is from a child's perspective, it's a lot of demons visiting kids. and they appear as safe angels with white wings because these are kids that can see ghosts. So they glow white and represent God, but they're not really of God. And so a lady, probably 2 weeks ago, said something on my webpage, and another lady said something privately, and they said, you have to remember that not all white angels are of God. And it made me think about this kid. And I said, you're right. There's a kid that told me that. And this kid said, and the kids that you work with have to be careful because what they're doing when they appear as if they glow white, they're manipulating the children. So you have to test them and you have to make sure that they are of God and they are protecting the children. And so I said, oh, I didn't know that. So all this time that I work with kids and think about some of the kids that I've talked to you guys about from the introduction all the way to blog 17. And throughout all the blogs, I talked about the difference between angels and demons, and that kids call demons dark angels. So to some kids, when they look at dark angels, they think demonic, and they think that white glowing angels are always of God. Here comes a kid who shifted everything for me and said that's not true. Dark angels are demons, but not all white angels are of God. God's angels are sent by him. So when you ask for protection, you ask for God's angels. That's something that the kids do not know. So obviously I was talking to a kid that was a little bit older. This is also a kid who was more religious. And you know what? It made sense to me because when I worked in that building, all of the kids that could see ghosts that I worked with, when I think about it now, they would describe them as God's angels at the doors, guarding the kids. I talked about that. But then you know what else? They would never tell me they saw dark angels in the building. Now, one was in the staircase, but it didn't come into the area where we worked. And this kid said, the building is blessed. The building is blessed, that's why. And this kid was right because it was a more religious company and they actually had some scriptures on the doors of every building. And isn't it funny when I talk about these blogs that several of the companies that I worked for actually had either a crucifix or scriptures or had something from the Bible or God in uh, on something. The doors, people had Bibles. When I think back on my career, that's interesting because even today somebody was talking about, having prayer sessions and that, keeping Bibles is something that, they want to do and blah, blah, blah. And so, I had told this person that I was going to repeat to you all something that she said since we're talking about, this. And she said, I keep some oil, like holy oil, in my room. And she said, it's because I have two kids that make her feel as if, I'm trying to stay guarded here, she needs to anoint them in oil. And I immediately looked at her and had the reaction that you just saw. And I stared at her and said, what do you mean? And she said, oh, I put my oil on their desk because I'm not having any demons in my room. And I said, what happened after you anointed the desk? Another lady chimed in and said their behaviors are so much better. And that was today. And so this is kind of tied into, what we're discussing. And it was such a game changer for me. Even her telling me today, every now and then I get confirmation about, some of my experiences, and that was confirmation today. But then this little kid was a game changer for me because this kid helped me to understand the difference. So going forward after this kid, I knew that whenever I encountered another nebulous child, it was my duty not just to protect that child, but to protect myself, because now I understood that there is a difference, and some of them are manipulating the kids by glowing, appearing white and glowing. And the other thing was, if you think about, the beauty of angels, it's not just, this is something else that I've been meaning to mention if I haven't. It's not that they're manipulating kids by changing form into clothes that are more kid friendly to appeal to them, but the other thing that they're doing is manipulating them from, how do I explain it? From making themselves glow, from being white, because sometimes kids only describe this stuff in black and white. And so dark is evil and scary, and white is good. So you see what was happening? If white is good, white was okay. And so those white angels would stay around and wouldn't leave unless they demanded them to leave, or they called out God's name and asked God to, or demand them in God's name to leave. So it became pretty interesting to me because I started to focus a bit more on what this kid was talking about in reference to angels. Always remember, Satan was a fallen angel. He was a fallen angel. So he's probably not ugly like we think. Maybe he can appear scary because obviously these demons appear scary to some of the kids, like Freddy Krueger marching his behind around, somebody's house, but they're not always visually scary. And it makes so much sense, even if you look at it from the perspective of movies. Here's an example. Do you remember Bruce Willis played a ghost? He didn't look scary. The little boy in that movie, what was that? Oh, what was that movie called? With Bruce Willis, where the little boy said, "I see dead people." Oh, I can't think of the movie. Oh, Sixth Sense. Thank you. Remember how he was able to talk to that little boy and we didn't find out he was a ghost until later? That's kind of how it works. But if you picture Bruce Willis's character glowing and white, a kid would think they're safe. Just like he thought Bruce Willis was safe the whole time the boy was seeing a ghost. Okay? So I hope you've seen the movie because I just gave you all the details about it. But when we are working with these kind of kids, or if you encounter one and they tell you that there are ghosts around you, white angels that glow and they look beautiful around them or around you, kind of do what I did and start testing them out to make sure they are of God. Because remember, all the kids saw all kinds of angels around me. To this day, they still do when I do encounter one. And I'm always asking, what do they look like? Oh my God, they're white, they're glowing. What? Let me find my Bible and test them. And I always say it doesn't matter what you believe in. These are the things that work. You don't have to be religious in order to, understand how to help these kids. And so that is what happened with these kids in the trees. So remember, they were calling these kids and they were sometimes up in the trees telling them to come up the tree and stuff like that. It got a little scary at that point, with these kids, with these kids and them seeing, different things And remember too, I can't see those things. I don't see ghosts. A lot of you can. And I appreciate you telling me your stories. So I want to hear from you. I appreciate you guys listening. I think that is enough for today. All right. So this podcast is going to get in your head next week. I had talked about Blog 18 last week. So excited about it. Telling you guys we're going to talk about twin flames next week, which was today. And actually, I forgot about Blog 17. So we're actually going to start talking about twin flames next week. You guys should read that blog. I broke it up in 3 different blogs over the course of 3 weeks. And actually, I can talk about these kids for days and days. It's going to take a minute to unpack everything that happened with those kids. And I'm going to go slow with it because these kids were scary. These 2 kids are scary. Were scary. That's why I call them twin flames. And you'll understand why if you tune in next week. And if you look at my blog, every single picture that I put up is exactly what happened back then. Not that other pictures aren't on my blog, but with them, they scared the crap out of me. I didn't get as scared with Child E. Not even a little boy that we talked about today that could see the hippie ghost. But these 2, they were scary. And I'm going to leave you with that. I'll see you next week. You guys have a good night.